The stars were always a mystery to humans. For centuries, we looked up at the vastness of space, dreaming of what was out there, imagining alien worlds and life forms beyond our understanding. But no one ever expected them to come. The Zarvuk Empire was unlike anything Earth had ever encountered. Their ships were colossal, dark, and menacing, floating effortlessly in the sky as they approached our planet. The way their vessels seemed to pierce the atmosphere was unlike any technology the humans had ever seen. At first, it seemed like something out of a nightmare. Governments from every corner of the world scrambled to respond, sending military forces to track the unknown ships. Some believed it was a space station from a far-off galaxy, while others feared it could be a new kind of weapon, something beyond the scope of human imagination. For weeks, the Zarvuks stayed in orbit, silently observing us. They made no attempts to communicate or introduce themselves. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was enough to send a clear message. They were here, and they had power beyond anything we had ever seen. The first sign of their true intentions came when they opened fire on a few military satellites, instantly cutting off any form of communication between the different world governments. The weapons they used were precise, almost surgical. Entire structures, once thought indestructible, were reduced to smoldering ruins in seconds. And still, the Zarvuks didn't engage directly with humanity. They didn't need to. They had proven their superiority with just a single attack. The world trembled. Leaders around the globe held emergency meetings, each one more frantic than the last. Some countries attempted to negotiate, sending out desperate messages in every language, hoping for peace or some sort of arrangement. But the Zarvuks didn't respond. They were not here for diplomacy. They were here to conquer. No one understood just how powerful they were. They had ships so large that they seemed to swallow the skies. The technology inside their vessels was beyond any human comprehension. And their weapons, well, their weapons were designed for one thing only: destruction. The world's best minds started working together, pooling resources and intelligence. But despite their efforts, there was nothing they could do. The Zarvuk fleet hovered high above Earth's major cities, watching, waiting. The human race was at its most vulnerable, and the hope of survival seemed slim. The first real attack came on a quiet afternoon. It was sudden. A single beam of light shot down from one of the Zarvuk ships, striking the ground with such force that the shockwave could be felt miles away. The blast completely flattened an entire city, leaving nothing but scorched earth in its wake. There was no warning, no sign of the attack until it was too late. The devastation was so sudden and complete that it left the world in shock. Governments and military forces scrambled to respond, but it was clear that Earth was no match for the might of the Zarvuk Empire. For the people who lived through that first wave, everything changed. The world that had once felt safe, with bustling cities and peaceful days, was now a battlefield. Panic spread like wildfire as people rushed to escape the chaos. But where could they run? There was no place on Earth that was safe. The sky, once filled with the promise of dreams and adventure, had turned into a place of dread. The Zarvuks had not only come to destroy, they had come to mock. It was as if they were challenging humanity, daring us to fight back. But humanity didn't give up. There was something deep inside the human spirit that refused to let the world fall to these invaders. Despite being overwhelmed by the size of the Zarvuk fleet, Earth's military forces, though disorganized and lacking in resources, began to launch small counterattacks. The first attempts were laughable. The Zarvuk ships were too powerful, their technology far beyond what humanity could match. The rockets, missiles, and fighter jets that Earth sent up were easily swatted away by the Zarvuks' advanced weapons. Yet, despite the obvious superiority of the alien fleet, there was a spark of hope. The humans fought back, stubbornly and relentlessly, even though it seemed pointless. They were not giving up. And perhaps that was the one thing the Zarvuks had underestimated. As the days passed, the global resistance grew. Some countries had already surrendered, hoping for mercy from their conquerors. But there were others, smaller nations, who were not willing to go down without a fight. These countries began to form alliances, sharing what little technology they had and pooling their resources. They didn't have the firepower the Zarvoks had, but they had something more: unity. As the last standing human forces joined together, the question became not if they could fight back, but how. In the darkest moments, when it seemed like humanity might fall, one thing became clear: the Zarvoks had underestimated Earth. They had underestimated humans. The aliens had seen us as weak, fragmented, and divided. They thought they could break us with a single strike, but they had missed something crucial. Humans had something they couldn't easily destroy: our ability to adapt. While Earth's military couldn't stop the Zarvok ships, they could learn. They could study the invaders' weaknesses. The first sign of this came when a few of the smaller resistance groups managed to hit a Zarvok ship just once. It wasn't much, but it was something. The weaponry used by the resistance wasn't even close to being on par with what the Zarvok Empire wielded, but the small victory sent a message. Earth wasn't done yet. We weren't ready to surrender. We were just getting started. But even with this small victory, it became clear that Earth would need something more. Something powerful enough to take down the Zarvok fleet, to give humanity a fighting chance. It was no longer just about survival. It was about making the Zarvoks understand one simple truth: Earth wasn't going to bow to them. The humans had one advantage that the Zarvoks didn't seem to understand: we were willing to fight. We were willing to make impossible sacrifices. In the shadows, away from the war-torn cities and the global chaos, a team of scientists was working on something that could turn the tide. It wasn't ready yet, but it was humanity's last hope. The world had no choice but to rally together, to believe that there was a way to win, no matter how slim the chances were. And so, the battle for Earth was far from over. The Zarvok Empire had arrived with laughter in their hearts, confident that humanity would crumble under their might. But little did they know, the fight was only beginning. As the days passed and humanity witnessed the true power of the Zarvok Empire, it became painfully clear that Earth was losing the battle. Cities that once thrived with life were now in ruins, and the few military strongholds left standing were no match for the alien invaders. The world's leaders watched helplessly as their best efforts were torn apart by the overwhelming might of the Zarvok fleet. In every corner of the world, people were desperate. The once bustling streets were now empty, the skies filled with fear. Humanity was united in their fight to survive, but they were facing an enemy so advanced that they could barely comprehend its technology. The enemy ships that hovered above Earth were a constant reminder that the planet was under siege. The Zarvoks had shown no mercy, and it seemed as if there was no hope left. But as the battle raged on, a small group of people were working tirelessly behind the scenes, hidden from the destruction above. In a secret underground facility, far from the reach of the Zarvok Empire, a team of the world's most brilliant scientists had come together to create a weapon that could turn the tide in humanity's favor. The project had been in the works for years. Long before the first alien ships had entered Earth's atmosphere, a group of engineers and physicists had started working on an idea born from the desire to protect Earth from any kind of outside threat. They had spent countless hours studying alien technology, reverse engineering what they could, and designing their own advanced weapon. They knew that in order to defeat the Zarvoks, humanity would need more than just conventional weapons. The Zarvok ships were far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. They were indestructible to the weapons humans currently had, with shields and armor that made them nearly invulnerable. Conventional bombs, missiles, and fighter jets had proven ineffective, with nothing but frustration following each attempt. It was clear that if Earth was to stand a chance, something radical had to be done. The weapon they had been working on was codenamed Prometheus. The name was a tribute to the myth of the Titan who gave fire to humanity, a symbol of knowledge and power. Just like the Titan's gift, Prometheus was meant to be a gift to humanity, a weapon powerful enough to strike back against the Zarvok Empire. Prometheus wasn't a weapon like anything the world had ever seen. Unlike the missiles and bombs that had been used in previous attempts, this weapon was built to exploit a fundamental weakness in the Zarvok technology. It wasn't about brute force, it was about precision, using the enemy's own technological flaws against them. The weapon was designed to send a beam of concentrated energy powerful enough to penetrate the shields of Zarvok ships and disable their systems. However, there was one problem. The weapon wasn't ready. In fact, it was far from it. The scientists knew that it would take time to charge up, and every moment counted. They were racing against the clock. Earth had already lost so much. The human race couldn't afford to wait much longer. The Zarvok fleet, with its ships and advanced weapons, had already shown the world what they were capable of. Time was running out. In the early days of the invasion, when the Zarvoks first arrived and unleashed their terror, the project was still in its infancy. The weapons core was incomplete, and the energy source needed to power it was unstable. The engineers had been pushing their limits to build something that could even come close to the destructive power of the Zarvok fleet, but they knew that their best hope lay in harnessing something far more extraordinary than just military might. The team of scientists, working in secret, had built a powerful fusion reactor to charge Prometheus. This reactor used energy drawn from the Earth's core, a source of near unlimited power. It was unlike anything humanity had ever attempted, and its potential was enormous. But even with the incredible power it could generate, the weapon was still untested. It was as if the team had created a bomb with the potential to destroy an entire city, yet had no idea whether it would work. Every day felt like a race against time. The scientists worked day and night, knowing that the fate of the world rested on their shoulders. They were isolated in their underground facility, surrounded by machines, wires, and glowing screens. The air was thick with tension as they made adjustments, tested circuits, and ran simulations to make sure that Prometheus would work. The weapon was humanity's last hope, and they couldn't afford to fail. Despite the pressure, the scientists found moments of hope. When one of the test runs showed that the energy beam could penetrate a simulated Zarvok shield, there was a brief moment of triumph. They were getting closer. But each success was followed by another challenge: how to stabilize the reactor, how to perfect the weapon's targeting system, and how to ensure that the beam could be accurately aimed at the Zarvok ships from Earth's surface. There were so many unknowns. If they failed, the entire planet could be lost. At the same time, the resistance forces scattered across the world were doing their best to delay the Zarvok assault. They weren't equipped to fight the aliens directly, but they used every resource at their disposal. Small groups of survivors sabotaged Zarvok infrastructure, tried to slow down the alien forces, and searched for any way to buy the scientists more time. They were well aware that Prometheus was the only thing that could save them, but they didn't know how long it would take for the weapon to be ready. Days turned into weeks, and the weapon was still not operational. The resistance continued to fight, though each day the hope seemed to fade a little more. The Zarvoks had taken control of most of the planet's major cities. It was clear that the battle for Earth was almost lost. Still, a small spark of hope remained in the underground laboratories, where the scientists were still working, unwilling to give up. Then, the moment came. After what seemed like an eternity of trial and error, the weapon was finally ready. Prometheus was complete. The team of engineers and scientists, exhausted and barely able to stand, gathered around the console as they made the final preparations for the weapon's launch. The fusion reactor hummed with power, and the weapon's targeting systems locked onto the largest of the Zarvok ships, a massive, ominous structure hovering above Earth's atmosphere. The time had come. The fate of humanity would be decided in a single shot, one blast. That was all it would take. As the final countdown began, the scientists held their breath. They had worked for years to make this moment a reality. The pressure was unimaginable. If Prometheus didn't work, Earth's last chance would be gone. But if it did work, if it truly had the power to strike down the Zarvok ships, humanity might stand a chance. The thought of such a possibility was both thrilling and terrifying. With a final press of a button, the beam was unleashed. A powerful, blinding flash of energy shot from the weapon, reaching the skies in an instant. The energy was focused and precise, cutting through the vastness of space. The beam hit the Zarvok ship with the force of 1,000 storms, sending shockwaves across the atmosphere. The ship shuddered, its shields flickering as the beam continued to tear through its defenses. The day of the first strike was a day that would be remembered for generations. It was a moment that began to shift the balance of power in the war against the Zarvok Empire. For so long, it had seemed as if Earth was helpless, as if the human race stood no chance against the overwhelming might of the invaders. Cities had been reduced to rubble, entire populations had been wiped out, and humanity seemed to be on the brink of extinction. But there, in the dark silence of the war, a single ray of hope emerged. The weapon that had been years in the making, Prometheus, had fired. It had done what no one thought was possible. For the first time, a Zarvok ship had been struck with force so powerful that it shuddered under the impact. The shields that had once seemed impenetrable began to flicker, and for a brief moment, the invaders felt the sting of vulnerability. The beam wasn't just an attack. It was a symbol. It was humanity's declaration that they were not done fighting. The weapon wasn't a magic solution, but it was enough. Enough to show that the Zarvok fleet could be hurt. The first strike left a sense of urgency in the air. The Zarvoks, who had once laughed at the idea of humans ever posing a real threat, were no longer so certain of their victory. There had been a shift in the balance of power. The invaders had underestimated humanity's resilience, and that mistake would cost them dearly. As soon as the beam hit, the humans wasted no time. The success of Prometheus was a turning point, and Earth's leaders understood that the time to act was now. The world's remaining military forces, scattered and disorganized after so many defeats, now had a glimmer of hope. They knew they had to strike while the Zarvoks were rattled, before they could recover from the shock. The humans launched a coordinated attack, sending every available fighter jet and missile system into the sky. The Zarvok ships, still recovering from the blast, were not prepared for such a concentrated effort. The surprise was on their side. Earth's forces had been weakened, but they still had the will to fight. They had something the Zarvoks didn't expect: determination. And in that moment, determination was the most powerful weapon they had. The first wave of attacks was small, missiles that were nowhere near as powerful as Prometheus, but missiles that carried with them the hope of a people who refused to give up. The fighter jets, though old and outmatched by the Zarvok ships, swarmed the skies like a swarm of angry bees. They attacked with everything they had, throwing everything they could at the alien invaders. The Zarvoks were caught off guard. For the first time, they realized that humanity wasn't going to just roll over and accept defeat. They had underestimated Earth's ability to fight back, and it was starting to show. The missiles struck with surprising precision, hitting vulnerable points in the Zarvok ship's armor. They didn't do much damage, but they did something even more important. They forced the Zarvok ships to change their approach. The once confident invaders now had to focus on defending themselves from the barrage of attacks coming from below. The sudden onslaught threw them off balance. But it wasn't just the missiles and jets that had caused the Zarvoks to pause. It was the humans' ability to adapt. Earth's scientists had been working hard to analyze the weaknesses in the Zarvok technology. They studied everything they could: the ships, the weapons, the shields. They knew that they couldn't defeat the invaders with brute force alone. But they also knew that the Zarvok ships had weaknesses, even if those weaknesses weren't immediately obvious. They had created weapons and strategies that were designed to exploit those weaknesses. Theoretical models suggest yes, through quantum entanglement. But Sana shrugged. Like everything else about this mission, we'll find out for sure when we try it. Min-Su let the discussion continue, watching his crew process the information. They were the best Earth had to offer: experienced, intelligent, and most importantly, adaptable. They would need all of those qualities where they were going. Training begins in 1 hour, he announced finally. We'll run simulations until everyone can perform their duties blindfolded. The Valorians gave us a deadline, but we're not waiting for it. We launch as soon as we're ready. The crew dispersed to their assigned stations, leaving Min-Su alone with Sana. She was staring at the Hansong through the briefing room's window, her expression distant. Having doubts, he asked quietly. Always, she admitted, but not about the science, not about the ship. I worry about what we'll find out there, in those higher dimensions. We're about to step into realms that human minds weren't designed to comprehend. Min-Su nodded. That's why we train. That's why we prepare. Whatever's waiting for us up there, we face it together. Through the window, engineers continued their work on the Hansong. Its hull seemed to shimmer slightly, as if already eager to slip between the dimensions. Soon, very soon, they would take humanity's greatest leap into the unknown. The fate of Earth rested on their success. But as Min-Su watched his crew prepare, saw their determination and courage, he felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. The Valorians thought they had humanity cornered. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Time to get started, he said, straightening his uniform. We have a lot to do, and the clock is ticking. Sana nodded, already moving toward the door. Welcome aboard the Hansong, Captain. Let's make history. Alarms blared throughout the facility as the Valorian ships entered Earth's solar system. In the Hansong's bridge, Captain Min-Su sat in the command chair, his fingers tight on the armrests as he watched the final launch preparations. All systems go, Park Dong-il reported from engineering. Dimensional drive is at full power. Medical bay standing by. Mai Kyung's voice came through clear. Anti-distortion drugs are ready for the crew. Min-Su took a deep breath. Everything they had trained for, everything humanity had worked toward, came down to this moment. Through the view screen, he could see the massive hangar doors sliding open above them, revealing a narrow shaft that led to the surface. Navigation systems online, Hannah announced from her station. Dimensional current patterns are mapped and locked in. Communications ready, Han-Mu added. Quantum entanglement links are stable. The Hansong hummed beneath them, its advanced systems coming fully alive for the first time. On the main display, red dots showed the approaching Valorian fleet, over 50 ships, each one capable of destroying a small country. They're beginning their final approach, Han-Mu reported. Picking up communication between their ships. They're preparing to launch their first strike. Min-Su straightened in his chair. This is it, everyone. Remember your training. We're about to go where no human has gone before. He pressed the ship-wide comm button. Dr. Lee, are we ready? In the engine room, Sana stood before the dimensional drive's control panel. Drive is primed and stable. Beginning power transfer now. Take us up, Min-Su ordered. The Hansong rose smoothly through the launch shaft, emerging into the cool night air. Above them, stars twinkled innocently, giving no sign of the alien armada approaching Earth. Valorian ships have detected us, Han-Mu called out. They're adjusting course to intercept. Let them come, Min-Su said calmly. Hannah, prepare for dimensional shift sequence. The navigation officer's hands flew over her controls. Course plotted through all 7 dimensional planes. Warning. Theoretical models show increasing reality distortion past the 5th dimension. Understood. Min-Su opened the shipwide channel again. All hands, prepare for dimensional shift. This is not a drill. Medical bay, begin anti-distortion treatments. The crew felt the slight sting of automated injectors in their seats. The drugs would help their minds cope with what they were about to experience. In theory, at least. Valorian ships in weapons range, Han-Mu reported. They're charging weapons. Now, Min-Su ordered. Initiate dimensional shift sequence. The Hansong's drive activated, and reality began to change. The stars seemed to stretch and bend around them. Haina's instruments showed cascade after cascade of impossible readings as they breached the first dimensional barrier. Fourth dimension achieved, she announced, her voice steady despite the visual distortions that made the bridge appear to ripple like water. Fifth dimension approaching. The crew felt it, a sensation of existing in multiple places at once, of seeing things that their brains couldn't quite process. The anti-distortion drugs helped, but nothing could fully prepare them for this experience. Fifth dimension breached, Hannah continued. Sixth dimension achieved. Through the view screen, they saw the Valorian ships, but not as solid objects. They appeared as time-smeared shapes, existing at multiple moments simultaneously. The aliens' weapons fire passed harmlessly through space. The Hansong had occupied microseconds ago. Seventh dimensional barrier approaching, Hannah announced. Her hands remained steady on the controls even as the bridge seemed to fold in on itself, angles existing that shouldn't be possible in normal space. In the engine room, Duhan's voice was filled with wonder. We've done it. We're actually doing it. The final barrier approached, a threshold that no known species had ever crossed. The Hansong's hull hummed with power as reality itself seemed to hold its breath. Breach in 3, 2, 1. The universe turned inside out. Every crew member felt their consciousness expand, touching realms of existence they had never imagined. Through the view screen, they saw everything. Past, present, and future overlapped. Space itself became a suggestion rather than a rule. Seventh dimension achieved. Hannah's voice cracked with excitement, all systems functioning within acceptable parameters. Min-Su allowed himself a small smile. Status report, all stations. One by one, the crew confirmed their systems were working. The Hansong had done it, achieved what the Valorians and the entire Galactic Council had thought impossible. Message from the Valorian fleet, Hyunbu announced, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. They're asking what we are. Let them wonder, Min-Su replied. Hannah, plot a course back to normal space. Let's show them exactly what humanity is capable of. The Hansong moved through dimensions like a fish through water, preparing to emerge where the Valorians least expected. Earth's first dimensional ship had just changed the rules of warfare forever, and somewhere in the engine room, Sana smiled, knowing that humanity's greatest moment had finally arrived. Reality shuddered as the Hansong tore through dimensional barriers, emerging behind the Valorian fleet like a ghost from another world. The enemy ships, their crystalline structures gleaming in the sunlight, continued firing at Earth's atmosphere, unaware that their greatest threat now lurked in their shadow. Dimensional transition complete, Hannah announced, her fingers dancing across the navigation controls. All systems nominal. Min-Su leaned forward in his command chair. Status of the Valorian fleet. 53 ships, all focused on atmospheric entry. Hyunmu reported from communications. They haven't detected us yet. Their sensors are still calibrated for normal space. The view screen showed the Valorian ships in perfect clarity, their angular, crystalline forms arranged in an attack formation that had conquered countless worlds. But they had never faced an enemy like this before. They can't track us, Hannah reported with a smile. Their targeting systems are trying to compensate, but we're shifting through dimensional planes faster than they can adjust. Their weapons are passing right through where they think we are. In the engine room, Sana monitored the dimensional drive's power levels. We can maintain this state for another 30 minutes before we need to recharge. Make them count. Min-Su nodded. Weapons status. Dimensional disruptors charged and ready. Dong-il reported from engineering. One hit should be enough to disable their dimensional shielding. After that, their ships will be trapped in normal space. The captain considered their options. The Hansong could strike with impunity, but they needed to make a statement. This wasn't just about defeating the Valorians. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity was no longer to be mocked. Target their flagship, Min-Su ordered. Let's introduce ourselves properly. The Hansong glided through space, shifting between dimensions so smoothly that to an outside observer, it would appear to flicker in and out of existence. The Valorian flagship, twice the size of its escorts, continued its approach to Earth, unaware of its impending doom. In range, Hana reported. Targeting solutions locked. Fire. The dimensional disruptor fired, not a beam or projectile, but a concentrated burst of multidimensional energy. It struck the Valorian flagship's shields and simply passed through them, as if they didn't exist. The energy burst hit the crystalline hull directly, sending cascading fractures through its structure. Alarms blared across the Valorian fleet as their flagship's systems failed. The mighty vessel, pride of their armada, drifted powerless in space. Direct hit, Dong-il cheered. Their dimensional shielding is completely offline. The remaining Valorian ships scrambled to respond, but they were fighting an enemy they couldn't properly see or target. The Hansong danced between dimensions, striking with precision and devastating effect. Message from the Valorian command ship, Hyunwoo announced. They're requesting communication. Min-Soo allowed himself a small smile. On screen, the crystalline face of the Valorian commander appeared, his faceted features showing what could only be described as shock. What are you? How is this possible? We are humanity, Min-Soo replied calmly. The same primitive species you came to conquer. Perhaps you should have studied us more carefully before making threats. Another Valorian ship fell to their dimensional weapons, its crystalline structure shattering as it was forced back into normal space. You're breaking laws of physics that cannot be broken, the commander protested. No species can survive transition beyond the fifth dimension. Sana's voice came over the comm. Your understanding of dimensional physics is as limited as your understanding of humanity. We don't just survive in higher dimensions, we thrive there. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for less than 10 minutes. Ship after ship fell to the Hansong's attacks, unable to defend against an enemy that could strike from anywhere, from any dimension, at will. Half their fleet disabled, Hana reported. The rest are breaking formation, trying to retreat. Not yet, Min-Soo said. Hyunwoo, broadcast on all frequencies. Let everyone hear this. The communications officer nodded, opening all channels. This is Captain Lee Min-Soo of the Earth ship Hansong, he announced, his voice carrying across space to every ship in range. Your fleet is defeated. Your weapons are useless. You came to our world believing us primitive and weak. Now you understand your mistake. The remaining Valorian ships hung motionless in space, their commanders surely realizing the full magnitude of their error. Return to your empire, Min-Soo continued. Tell them what you witnessed here. Tell them about the species that mastered the seventh dimension. Tell them about humanity. The Valorian commander's image appeared one last time on the view screen. His crystalline features had lost their arrogance, replaced by something that looked very much like fear. We withdraw, he said simply. Earth will be marked as forbidden territory in our star charts. Min-Soo nodded. A wise decision. Remember this day, Commander. Remember what happened when you underestimated humanity. The surviving Valorian ships engaged their engines, fleeing Earth's orbit as quickly as their conventional drives could carry them. On the Hansong's bridge, the crew watched them go in silence. Should we pursue? Hana asked. Min-Soo shook his head. No need. They'll spread the word. The galaxy is about to learn that the age of mocking humanity is over. The Hansong hung in space above Earth, its dimensional drive humming quietly as it shifted between planes of reality. Humanity's first great battle in the higher dimensions was over, and with it, everything had changed. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, the Galactic Council convened for an emergency session. The massive chamber, usually filled with casual conversation and diplomatic maneuvering, was unnaturally quiet. Representatives from hundreds of species waited, their attention fixed on the simple podium where Dr. Lee Sana stood. The same council members who had once laughed at humanity's petition now sat in tense silence. Councillor Rex, his crystalline form dimmed with what might have been shame, couldn't meet her eyes. Distinguished members of the council, Sana began, her voice steady. 3 months ago, you received reports of impossible events in the Sol system. Today, I'm here to explain exactly what happened. The holographic display behind her activated, showing the Hansong in all its glory. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the ship that had single-handedly defeated the Valorian fleet. For years, we humans listened to your mockery. You called us primitive, limited, trapped in our simple understanding of three-dimensional space. She paused, allowing a small smile. In response, we did what humans have always done. We pushed beyond those limitations. The display showed the Hansong's dimensional drive in action, demonstrating its ability to move smoothly between dimensional planes. Even now, months later, many species found the footage difficult to comprehend. The seventh dimension was never meant to be breached. One council member protested. The physiological strain alone should have been fatal. Should have been. Sana agreed, according to your understanding of physics. But your understanding was incomplete. She explained the principles behind humanity's breakthrough, showing how they had discovered the natural flows between dimensions, the currents that made smooth transition possible. The council chamber remained silent, dozens of species trying to grasp concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew. We never sought to prove our superiority, she concluded, looking around the chamber. We simply refused to accept limitations, and now we offer this knowledge to the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as equals. The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, one council member after another stood. What began as scattered applause swelled into thunderous approval. Species that had once dismissed humanity as primitive now showed genuine respect. Councillor Rex approached the podium after the session. Dr. Lee, he said, his crystalline form shifting with emotion, I owe you and your species an apology. We were arrogant, blind to possibilities we couldn't imagine. Sana nodded graciously. The past is past, Counselor. Let's focus on the future instead. The following weeks saw a dramatic shift in galactic politics. The Hansong's technology revolutionized space travel, opening new frontiers for exploration. Species that had once mocked humanity now sent their brightest minds to Earth, eager to learn. The Korean Advanced Physics Institute became a center for galactic scientific cooperation. In her lab, Sana worked alongside beings from dozens of worlds, all united in their pursuit of knowledge. One quiet evening, after most of her alien colleagues had retired, Sana sat at her desk, looking at an old family photo. Her grandfather stood proud in his military uniform, a survivor of war who never lost hope. Beside him, her mother smiled, a refugee who had overcome hardship to become a brilliant scientist. We've always known how to rise above, she whispered, touching the photo gently. The sight of alien scientists working alongside humans in her lab would have amazed her grandfather. Her mother would have loved discussing physics with beings from other worlds. Duhan found her there, still looking at the photo, ready to call it a day. She shook her head, pulling up the schematics for her latest project. Not yet. I think I've found something interesting in the 9th dimension. 9th? Duhan laughed. The galaxy's still trying to understand the 7th, and you're already pushing further. That's what humans do, she replied with a smile. We push boundaries. We explore. We refuse to accept limitations.